So welcome back to Daniel. We've had a break after studying Daniel part 1, chapters 1 through 6. And now we are getting back together to finish the book of Daniel, starting with chapter 7. And this part of Daniel is pretty much about prophecy, what's going to happen between Daniel's time and the end times. All right. So before we jump into chapter 7, I want to just quickly review the first 6 chapters so that our heads are kind of back in the game. Unfortunately, we had to take that break for about 6 weeks. And I don't know about you guys, but I had a hard time just getting my head back into Daniel and sorting out the statue and the dreams and the visions and putting it all together. So hopefully you can help me with all of that. So let's just generally, what do you remember about the first 6 chapters of Daniel? Anything that stands out to you? Anything that you have taken with you over the last 6 weeks? This is a pop quiz.
Some examples of the way that Daniel stood firm.
Yes, right. Yeah, Daniel was such a great example for us. Got us through the election month. Got us through, like, God is in control. Doesn't matter what happens. God is in control. Daniel never wavered in his belief. No matter what they threw at him, he was just like, I'm still just trusting in God. I'm not changing anything I'm doing. I'm just keeping focused on God. Anybody else? Any memories from Daniel 1 through 6 before we just start
He was
going?
so young when he started.
Well, there you go.
He was so young. And then so old when he went in the lion's den.
Yeah.
Took any of that in before.
Yeah. That's one of the great things about looking like at this timeline and looking at the age and like, oh, this is a whole different level that most of us hadn't even thought about before, how old he was at any place in this timeline. Because we know that Daniel where is he at the moment? Well, he's dead now, but where is he when we were studying this?
Babylon.
Babylon, right. Babylon, is that his home country?
Nope. He was in
No.
captivity with the rest of them.
Right. So he was taken in captivity from Jerusalem when Jerusalem was taken over by the Babylonians. So, and we know that he is going to be in captivity for 70 years. 70 years. So we want to keep that in mind when we look at this today, remembering that, like Patricia said, he was so young when he started. When he was taken captive, he was about 15. And in chapter 1, that's when we first see him in captivity. And that's where he had the test about eating the king's food, right? And he said, I don't want to eat it. Please just let me and my friends just eat these vegetables, which we've all come to love, vegetables. So just let us eat the vegetables and just see, because remember why he didn't want to eat the king's food?
It was probably sacrificed to an idol.
Yeah, more than likely. And he would have grown up under the laws of Leviticus, where you just eat certain foods, and this is how you live. And so that was his first challenge, and that went well for him. Daniel chapter 1. So in chapter 2, if you remember, who's the king at the time that Daniel's in captivity?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes, Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in chapter 2. And the dream was of a statue. And that statue, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. So we're not going to talk about the statue now, but Nebuchadnezzar had the dream. And remember that he asked that somebody could tell him the dream and what it means. He wouldn't tell anybody what the dream was. And Daniel was the only one who could then tell him the dream and what it meant. And that was because Daniel had asked his God for help in that. So that's the statue dream of Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel 3, Nebuchadnezzar, if you remember, he built a statue of gold. What was the head of the statue that was in his dream? Remember the head?
The head was gold.
The head was gold, and the head represented Nebuchadnezzar, right? And so now we think maybe that went to his head, and he built an entire statue of gold and required people to worship, to bow down to it. Now, who did not bow down?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Absolutely. And what happened to them?
They got thrown into the fiery furnace.
Right. And they died.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Just trying to trip you up. So yeah, they did not die. We know how that story turns out. And so that was in Daniel 3. Then in Daniel 4, Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. Remember what the dream was about?
A big tree.
Yes, a big tree. And this time Nebuchadnezzar told Daniel what the dream was and asked him to interpret it. And the tree was very mighty, and it fed people and took care of the birds and everything. So it was a very powerful tree. But in the dream, he said, cut it down and leave a stump, right? Cut the tree down and leave a stump. And when Daniel interpreted that to Nebuchadnezzar, what was the meaning of that dream?
That
Mark-
Nebuchadnezzar would be cut down, that he would lose his control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark, you were on mute. I thought you were saying something. Okay. So was he going to be totally cut off, Nebuchadnezzar?
No.
7
No,
years.
what? Okay, so what happened to him?
He was out in the wilderness, crawling around, covered in dew,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Eating grass.
yeah,
eating
Mhm.
grass. Yeah.
eating grass. Until when?
7 years.
And why did it end?
When he acknowledged God.
There you go. When he acknowledged God, okay? And then God restored him, and then he continued to reign, okay? So that was chapter 4. Chapter 5, we have a new king, Belshazzar, is now reigning in Babylon. And he's throwing a party. And remember that he's using all of the vessels from the temple in this party. And then there's the handwriting on the wall that is accusing him. And what happened to him?
He was
He died
struck
that
dead
night.
that night.
That very night, the kingdom was taken from him. And it was taken by who?
Darius.
Darius, okay? Is Darius Babylonian?
No.
No,
It
He's
was the Mede
a
and the
Mede.
Persian.
Mede.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the Medes. Okay, he's a Mede. So now we're coming to the second part of the statue, right? So the gold head was Babylon, and then the chest was the Medes and Persians. And you see that next kingdom coming into play in chapter 5. And now Daniel is serving Darius. And in Daniel chapter 6, what's the point there? What happens to Daniel? This is the lion's den. Remember? So why did he end up in the lion's den?
Because his peers were jealous, really.
Mhm.
Yeah, for he wouldn't, he was praying to God.
remember, they had all gotten together because Daniel had been appointed the head of all of them. And so they were jealous. And so they convinced the king to write an edict that nobody could
Right.
ask anything of any other god or any man except for Darius for 30 days. 30 days. And they knew that's all it would take to trick Daniel, right? 30 days. And so if they did, then they were to be thrown into the lion's den. Well, we saw Daniel again. He's just like, I'm just going to do what I always do. And he just continued to pray to his God every day. And so, of course, they ran to the king and reported it. And Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. And the king was upset because he could not reverse that edict. And he said to Daniel, your God who you worship every day will protect you, which he did. So Daniel survived the lion's den. And again, remember, how old was Daniel in the lion's den?
80 something, 82 or 3.
Yeah, right. So he started out at 15 and now in the lion's den, he's 80, which again is not something we think about. We just think he was a young guy thrown into the lion's den, but no. So we had a great time with Daniel for those 6 chapters. And now that brings us to chapter 7. And remember that the 6 chapters of Daniel, the first 6 ones, cover the entire time period of when he was in captivity, from the age of 15 to
80.
what's 85?
85.
Okay, because he's in captivity 70 years. So historically speaking, it covers that entire time period. And now what we're doing with chapter 7 through 12 fit into those 6 chapters on that timeline. Okay, and you kind of worked out that last when we did part 1, whenever that was. And you kind of wrote in on that timeline where each chapter fit. So if you have the timeline from this study, page 149, you'll see when it says the times and events of Daniel, sort of 2/3 of the way down on that chart. And you see that when he was age 15, that's when he was taken captive. And then it goes, they have this little arching arrow that goes, first, second, and third chapters are early in his captivity. And then chapter 4 covers a larger period of time. And then chapter 7, where will chapter 7 fit into that timeline?
I've
When
got
he was about 70, so
somewhere between 65 and 70 is what I had.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it's the
Yeah.
first year of Belshazzar, isn't it?
Right,
So
right.
that
Yeah,
would be 553.
Mhm. So it's around the time when he's around
yeah, he'd be
70.
70, yeah.
Yeah. And if you look where they have already put in for you chapters 5 and 6, right? So chapter 7 is taking place somewhere between chapter 4 and 5. So you can see how this is not chronological from the whole book of Daniel, but we're now plugging in each experience as it happened in Daniel's lifetime there. All right. So that's where chapter 7 fits. After chapter 4, because Belshazzar is the king, okay, and he's still reigning. This chapter 7 is about 50 years after chapter 2. And chapter 2, what happened in chapter 2?
Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
So it's Nebuchadnezzar's king. He has the dream of the statue. So the statue dream happens when Daniel is still a teenager. And now, 50 years later, we have chapter 7 where he has another dream about the beasts. Okay, so there's been a long period of time between the statue and this dream about the beast, about 50 years. Okay. See, and yeah, it's like, right. Because he had that dream Nebuchadnezzar did all those years ago that Daniel interpreted of that statue. Now let's look at the statue from chapter 2. You have on your chart the dream and vision of Daniel 2 and 7. So what are some of the things you learn generally about this statue? That
Well, I
the
was
dream of-
actually amazed at the symmetry that emerged, as
Mhm.
like that's what I love about these charts, because all of a
Mhm.
sudden the light bulb goes on. It's like, wait a minute, the mind
Yeah.
of a man, that's like the head of gold. And then the second beast had 3 ribs in his mouth, and that would be the section of the statue that has ribs.
Oh, yeah.
It all
Yeah.
correlates to each other.
Mhm.
Even the Son of Man was given dominion, and that rock we said was Jesus,
Mhm.
and the 10 horns and the 10 toes. Like, it's just amazing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
With a 50-year gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The scripture just ties everything together. Okay. So what do you see? What else do you see about this? Just about the statue itself from chapter 2? What does it represent?
Kind of its own timeline.
Mhm.
And some of it's already been fulfilled 50 years later.
Yes, right. 50 years later, when he has the dream of the beasts, some of it has already been fulfilled. What part of it has been fulfilled?
King Nebuchadnezzar's reign,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then the Medo-Persian Empire coming in. So that's into the second stage or whatever.
Right. Right. So the statue is already being fulfilled. So the statue represents different kingdoms, right? Different kingdoms. Babylonian kingdom, the Medes and Persians. We've seen this in Daniel. The third kingdom, we don't know that yet, who that is, but we'll find out in chapter 8. And then the fourth kingdom, and following the fourth kingdom, what do we have at what is that rock? What do we know about that rock?
That's Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be a kingdom that's not going to end, and that'll be Jesus, won't it?
Exactly. Exactly. So you see all these other kingdoms, they're replaced by the next one, replaced by the next one, replaced by the next one. But the kingdom of God will not be replaced. So we have that statue represents history from the time of Nebuchadnezzar all the way to the end of time. I like that. People are like,
Yeah. And then when the Jesus rock, didn't it like crush the clay and iron feet, the divided kingdom, which I'm assuming makes everything just tumble down and go away. And
turned
only
into dust, right?
Right.
When it said that.
right.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Crazy indeed.
It's crazy.
So that's the statue which we're basing everything. It's going back to the statue that we're looking at. in chapter 7, because the beast, the vision of the beast, like you were saying, Blythe, it just correlates, with the statue, with these kingdoms, all right? So, in chapter 7, let's look at that, because Daniel, again, in the first 13 verses, what is happening? What is he seeing?
Well, he sees in his vision, he sees the 4 beasts coming up out of the
Mhm.
ocean. And then he proceeds to describe what he saw of each of
Mhm.
those beasts. Then he sees God on his throne.
Right. So let's look at the beasts. How many beasts are there?
4.
4, okay? And they're represented by different animals, correct? Okay,
Yep.
and then on your chart, on your Daniel, the dream and vision of Daniel 2 and 7, then you wrote down about the beast opposite the statue, okay? And let's just talk about any parallels that you saw other than the ones that Blythe mentioned.
Well, it also mentions that it stands on 2 feet like a man. So that immediately makes you think of the statue.
Okay, so Babylon. So the question they're asking us in the workbook is, do you see that these parallel, are these 2 dreams about the same kingdoms?
Seems like
Just
that.
now, yeah, just represented in the statue, now represented in the beasts.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the lion, the first one, parallels Babylon.
Mhm.
It was given a human mind. Okay. And if we go back to chapter 4 of Daniel, where Nebuchadnezzar was cut off and was like an animal until he recognized, and then he was restored. So you have where it says that it had the wings of eagles, and then they were plucked off, and he was made to stand. So we have that resembling the same thing as Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. What's the second animal?
The bear.
Okay, the bear. What do we see about the bear?
Are you in 4, chapter 4? He had 3 ribs in his mouth.
What else
Kind of
about the bear?
refers to the combination of the Medes and the Persians by
Mhm.
saying part of it was raised up. And so the Persians were stronger than the Medes, not initially, but
Right.
eventually. And that's the
Right.
part that was raised up.
Right. So you have that's the Medes and Persians, but one is stronger, right? One is stronger. And that's the part we've seen in Daniel 5, when the Medes and Persians came in and took over the kingdom. What about the third one, the third beast?
The leopard with the 4 wings of a bird
Okay,
and 4 heads.
4 heads. Okay, so this next kingdom is described as having 4 heads, 4 wings. That comes in after the Medes and Persians as the next ruling kingdom. And we'll see more about that in the next chapter. Now the fourth one. What's the 4th beast like?
Dreadful. and
Dreadful,
terrifying.
dreadful and terrifying.
It had big iron teeth,
Mhm,
which refers to the iron of the 4th kingdom.
mhm. How else is it described?
It has 10 horns.
Okay, 10 horns. What do we know that horns represent?
Kings.
Kings. We saw that in Revelation, right? That the horn represents kings. So if it had 10 horns, it represents 10 kings. Did it only have 10? What happened then?
Oh, no,
3 others. 3 were plucked out by another one.
What?
Another one. What's that another one?
that little one,
A little one came
the
up.
little one that has eyes like a man and a mouth that was speaking things, great things.
Boasting. Yeah.
Huh.
So we're going to sort all that out as we study this book. But then you have in verse, we get to the good part. In verse 9, when he says, I kept looking. And what does he see then?
The Ancient of Days, which is God.
Is God, right?
Mhm.
What did you think about that description of God there?
I liked it. It's kind of how I picture God sitting up there on his throne with his big white hair and his white robes,
Huh?
makes him look nice.
I'm sure he'll be appreciative of that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
like thinking of God.
So what else do you see in that description about the Ancient of Days?
Well, his throne was on fire, fiery flames with wheels, burning fire. So it sounded a bit scary. Stream of fire came out, issued from him.
I suppose
Thousands
the
upon
picture is-
thousands attending them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thousands
It's going to be
upon
bigger than
thousands.
and scarier than anything that's come before. Bigger.
Oh, okay,
More
good.
powerful. Yeah.
Remember, this is Daniel at the age of, what did we say?
70-ish.
70?
Yeah.
Yeah. Having this dream.
And just that one little segment, the court sat in judgment and the books were opened. That
Mhm.
kind of makes you feel a little scared. Like, oh yeah, that's the moment. That's the thing right there.
Yeah.
The books were open.
Mhm. So what happens? What happens there?
Well, the horn was speaking.
Yeah, that little horn,
That
the
little
big mouth.
horn.
Yeah.
And then the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire.
Mhm.
There's part of your judgment right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then go, what happens in verse 13?
And Jesus is presented.
Yeah,
before
out of
God.
the heavens, out of the clouds came one like the Son of Man,
Mhm.
named Jesus.
Yeah, we're waiting for that day, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So he comes. So you have in this description in his dream, you have God, the Ancient of Days, and then you have Jesus coming into that picture. And what happens? What does God give to Jesus?
Everlasting dominion.
Yeah, right, right. Everlasting dominion. It says in glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. And that takes us back to the rock at the base of the statue, right? So you can see that this statue is, I mean, it goes right to the end of time. This fulfillment of this, okay? And the beasts. So as you paralleled Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, it seems like those just really pair up. The statue representing those kingdoms and the beast representing those same kingdoms, and finally representing the final kingdom that belongs to Jesus. What was Daniel's response? How was he feeling after this dream?
He was anxious.
Visions around him.
Yeah. Verse 15 says his spirit was distressed.
Mhm. Any thoughts about that?
It is kind of funny because he was the one who interpreted the statue
Mhm.
dreams. And so it is odd that he found it anxious and alarming when he already knew this story. So I wonder why he didn't find it just sort of like, there, see, I told you, like I was right. You know, but
I think this is a bit more scary than the statue, though.
Mhm.
yeah, true.
Yeah, maybe.
The beasts, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Especially the fourth one, because what did he want to know about that fourth one?
Know the truth about the fourth,
Yeah, about the
because it
horns.
was terrifying.
Yeah, he really just wanted to know about that fourth one.
He didn't have the exact meaning.
Mhm.
According to verse 16, he asked others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say the same thing. Evidently, when he first had the dream, he didn't know the interpretation because he has to ask someone else to interpret it for him.
Mhm. And again, it's been 50 years since the statue dream of Nebuchadnezzar. This was Daniel's dream.
But didn't the statue more represent a point in time view? This is now the next kingdom, the kingdom after that, and then the fourth kingdom.
Mhm.
You didn't see, other than it being crushed and blown away, and a final kingdom being built, whereas in his of looking at the beast, it was more like it was an ongoing thing, and seeing how the beast was so destructive and wearing out the saints, and there was more there than he had when he had looked at just the statue. That's kind of how I took it.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good point. There's more information there. Right. About the end. And this is Daniel's people. Okay. We're talking about in the end, the saints that the little horn is persecuting. These are Daniel's people. And these are the Jews. And he knows that the end of the 70 years is coming. And so this, yeah, that would be scary. Remember, we're going to be spending 3 weeks in this chapter, so we're going to be putting the pieces together. Right now, we're just trying to get this all in our heads about this statue and the vision of the beast. So Daniel, it upset him, and he didn't tell anybody. You know, it's at the very end of the chapter. It says that the revelation ended, and as for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming. My face grew pale, but I kept the matter to myself. And again, I think that's just because of he knows this is what's coming for his people. So let's look at the rest of the chapter to just kind of finish that out and see just some of the facts that we can pick up there. He asked for the meaning of the fourth beast in 19 through 22. And you see what was the description of that? 19 through 22.
Well, he was stronger than all the others. It says he devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with his feet. And they talked specifically about the three of them, the three kings, which three of the kings fell before him. So I'm assuming those were the gold, silver, and the bronze and iron.
Verse 21 says that that horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them.
Right. And that's the scary part.
Until.
Thank you, Patricia, until.
That's
Yeah.
the big word in that chapter.
Yeah.
That's the word we want to hang on to. Until what?
The Ancient of Days comes.
You're right. Till the Ancient of Days comes. And that's our hope, right? We look forward to that stone at the base of that statue that was not made with hands. Yeah. So that's until he comes and passes judgment in favor of the saints of the highest one. So we already know who wins this. What about that little horn in 23 through 27, talking about these horns and that little horn? What do we see about that horn?
He's different from all the other kingdoms, and he'll devour the whole earth, tear it down, and crush it. So things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, get worse before the until happens. Yeah.
So 23, 27 kind of give you more detail about 21 and 22.
Right. Not sure Daniel would have wanted that much detail in the end, but okay, that's too much information. Yeah. But this is all prophetic, and it's all history, and we're going to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one phrase in there. He's going to make alterations in times.
Right.
Where's that?
Yeah,
Yes,
whatever-
David.
25.
yeah.
He'll
Thank you.
speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law,
Oh, yeah.
and they will be given into his hand for a times and a half a time.
What do we know about that? What is that time frame? Time, times, and half a time. That was, I think, in the early part of the lesson.
Remember that.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. We looked up some scripture about days, like 3.5 years, or 1,260 days, or times and half a time.
I don't think that was in this lesson, though.
Mm-mm.
Maybe the next lesson.
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Or Revelation.
Okay. So
I don't
right now we
remember
don't.
that.
Thank you, because I just gave it away for next week. Yeah. So right now Dave wants to know about that time, times, and half a time. So you can answer that in the study next week. Okay. But yeah, he's going to make alterations in that. So it's like, yeah, he's going to try to change everything. And we know how long that will last, times and habits. Okay, so I'm not saying any more about that, okay?
Spoiler
Yeah,
alert.
spoiler alert, yes, but it's important.
Isn't it sort of a revelation? I wouldn't know how long is long or whatever, but there's a time when Satan does take over,
Right,
and before
right,
he's
yeah,
defeated.
right.
I presume that's this
Yeah,
kind of time.
yeah, and I mean, and we're talking about the Antichrist, and we're talking about, you know, walking into the temple and taking over, you know, we're talking here about the 7 weeks of Daniel. There's a 7 weeks of Daniel that is still to be fulfilled. And so in the middle of that 7 weeks, this is going to happen. And we're going to look at that, you know, in the coming lessons. Okay, we'll see what that all means. But so right now, just keep it tucked away as I wonder about that. I wonder about that. Okay. Anything else you wonder about there? Yeah, verse 27 is good. After the court will sits for judgment, then the little horn's dominion will be taken away. And then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. So we already has been told the end of the story. Now we just have to go back and fill in the gaps and try to understand how that all happens and what we can look forward to. So looking at this, how does it make you feel about God? How does it make you feel about prophecy? What do you understand here? How does it help you to see God in all of this?
My
He's in
take
control.
on these prophecies and that is just all I need to do is obey and be ready. And like Daniel, stand firm and God takes care of it.
But not in the time scale that we always want or think, which is why, Nancy, isn't it? We've just got to be faithful and be ready.
Mm. And things weren't always good for Daniel, right? He faced a lot of challenges. It didn't change his faithfulness. So Daniel just stayed the course. I like that, knowing that between chapter 2 and chapter 7 was 50 years. And that vision 50 years later is the fulfillment of the statue. You know, so it's like what God says, what he says, it will happen. It will happen.
Mhm.
Even if we have to go through that period until.
I like the fact that God just sort of reveals to us some things and some clues about the end times, but I kind of feel like we probably couldn't handle, you can't handle the truth, like that line. Like
Yeah.
if he
Yeah.
told us everything, we would freak out. But he gives it to us in just a symmetrical and sort of like a way that my brain can get it,
Mhm.
without knowing everything. I feel comfort actually in seeing the logic of this and seeing how thought out it is, that I don't think it's going to be horrible for us, in the end times, because we have this assurance, and we have the Bible, we know Jesus came, we know where we're going. So in a way, I find it comforting, more comforting than scary.
Good, good.
I find it interesting too that, there are people who envision a one world government, but governed by man. And this, there will be a one world government, but it'll be governed by Jesus. It won't be any mortal man. And you can take comfort in that.
Right.
If we think we're in the time of the little horn at the moment, which we probably are, there's so much really anti-Christ, anti-God around us. Isn't it lovely to know that God is sovereign and he's
Yep.
going to be in
Right.
control? He is in control, but he will take over and it'll be his kingdom.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like, that Daniel saw that in the vision too, that would be comforting to him too. It didn't end with just the kingdoms and the kings. It's like, yeah, that rock is part of it. That rock is the end of it all.
I feel like we have to be cautious in looking at these prophecies, because I think about all the prophecies of when Jesus was going to be born and how all that was going to play out. And you think about all the spiritual religious scholars that got it wrong, and they had all the stuff to study, and actually the wise men got it right. But anyway, I just feel like, we have to be kind of careful how much stock we put in interpretation and kind of let it unfold. I don't know.
Mhm.
I guess maybe I'm a little more scared than you, Blythe.
Maybe.
Well, you two live by each other now, so you can just support each other there. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very valid point. And when we get finished studying this, we're not going to be able to say with certainty that this is it. That this is how it's going to happen. Right? But there are a lot of clues here about the timing. The timing could be thousands of years from now, or it could be next year. Yeah. So how does that affect us? We're just be like Daniel. Just stay faithful. Yeah. Be confident in God being sovereign in it all. Hey, are your brains exploding at this point? Yeah, yeah. We're just gonna put it together little by little and see how well we do with it. But so next week you will be looking at the times and half time. Yeah. It was so funny because you all had these blank looks on your faces, like, what? And I think, well, wait, am I crazy? Yeah. Yeah. So good. All right. So if there's nothing else, then I'll let you go and just dig more into chapter 7 for next week's lesson. And we'll put those pieces together. So yeah, if you're confused, it's okay. I'm confused. We just have to just walk step by step and see what we can see. But knowing that God is sovereign in all of it. And God gave that to Daniel, and he wrote it all down, and he was alarmed by it. So, yeah. But we can just know, and fortunately, we know that the rock is going to be the final kingdom. So that's going to be our hope. Okay. Anything else?
I'm good.
Yeah, thank you anyway.
Yeah, it's good to get back into it.